In the spring of 1942, a father and son drove into the Texas hill country and disappeared. Their truck was found abandoned by the river, the keys still in the ignition. No ransom, no bodies, no goodbye. For 83 years, the Heller disappearance was a ghost story told in whispers, until a single photograph arrived at my office. Scrawled across the back were 5 words: "He didn't drown." He confessed. What began as a wartime tragedy became something far darker, a secret sealed beneath the river, and a confession no one was meant to hear. Subscribe for more true investigations and follow me into the dark. Texas Hill Country, March 1942. The sky was low and bruised that evening, a storm rolling slow across the horizon. Jacob Heller tightened the tarp over the bed of his truck while his son, Thomas, sat on the tailgate swinging his legs, watching the clouds. "Won't be long now," Jacob said, nodding toward the road. "Once the rain hits, we'll wait it out by the river." Thomas smiled faintly. He was small for 12, dark-haired like his mother, a boy more curious than cautious. Their trip had started as a supply run to town: feed, kerosene, nails. But somewhere between Waco and the back roads beyond the Pedernales, Jacob had changed direction. A storm warning had gone out across the county. Most folks turned home. The Hellers turned toward the water. They reached the old iron bridge just after sunset. The river beneath ran high, swollen from days of earlier rain. Thomas leaned over the railing, peering down. "It looks like it's breathing," he said. Jacob laughed softly. "That's what rivers do. They take in what you forget to let go." He said it like a man quoting scripture. By nightfall, the truck's tire tracks ended at the bridge, and the Hellers were simply gone, as if the road ahead had been cut out of the world. When the sheriff found the truck abandoned near the riverbank 2 days later, the keys were still in the ignition. The driver's door hung open. No footprints led away, only a child's shoe caught between the rocks. For weeks, the county searched. Dogs, boats, volunteers with lanterns. Nothing. Then came the quiet years. The war ended. The bridge rusted. The Heller farm changed hands. The case thinned into local legend. The father who ran, the son who followed, the river that kept them. And people learned to talk around the Hellers' names instead of saying them. Until the morning of May 14th, 2025, when an anonymous letter arrived at the University of Texas History Department addressed to Dr. Mara Ellison. Inside was a photograph, 2 figures standing by that same rusted bridge, and scrawled across the bottom in ink that bled through the paper: "He didn't drown." He confessed Austin, Texas. May 2025, Dr. Mara Ellison had seen her share of dead ends. But something about the photograph refused to leave her desk. It sat between stacks of academic reports, one of them her own unfinished manuscript on faith-based disappearances of the American South. The letter had no return address, only a Waco postmark blurred by rain. The faces in the photo were indistinct, shadows against the washed-out gray of the river, one tall, one smaller. The bridge behind them sagged under rust. She turned it over again. He didn't drown. He confessed. Confessed to what? Her research assistant, Nico Alvarez, leaned in the doorway with a cup of coffee. "You've been staring at that thing for 2 hours." "It's the Heller case," Mara said quietly. Jacob and his son disappeared in 42. The archives say accidental drowning, but there were inconsistencies. Missing parish reports, no death certificates. Someone's reopening it. Could be a prank. Maybe. But the handwriting matches a signature in the sheriff's file. A deputy named Leon Marsh. Nico frowned. He'd be dead by now. 87. If he's alive, he lives near Kerrville. Retired after the flood of 72, Mara stared at the photo again. If this is really his, he's confessing to something the department buried. She packed the letter into an evidence sleeve, slid it into her leather satchel, and shut down her computer. Outside, the air hung heavy with humidity, the kind that made metal taste faintly of rain. By the time she reached the parking lot, dusk had begun to sink over Austin. Streetlights blinked through the mist. She paused, glancing at her reflection in the car window. Tired eyes, hair pulled back too tightly, the look of someone who'd spent her life digging through other people's ghosts. The drive west took 3 hours. The highway fell away to 2-lane roads bordered by mesquite and limestone. With each mile, the modern world thinned. Cell signal died, billboards vanished, and the sky widened into an ocean of gray. Kerrville slept beneath it, a town of faded storefronts and church spires. The local diner still burned its neon sign, Blue Star Cafe. Open all night. Mara pulled in, ordered coffee, and spread her notes across the booth. The file she downloaded before leaving included the original 1942 incident report. Truck found abandoned. Keys in ignition. Evidence of struggle none. Missing persons, Jacob Heller, 38. Thomas Heller, 12. Case closed by presumption of drowning. Yet in the margin, faint pencil marks read, Subject confessed under duress. Seal record. LM. LM, she whispered. Leon Marsh. A voice interrupted her thoughts. You looking for the Hellers? She looked up. An elderly man stood at the counter nursing a cup of tea. His face was lined but alert, eyes pale blue beneath a weathered cap that read Texas Park Service. You knew them? She asked. Knew of them. My daddy worked the search. River took 'em, they said, but you don't believe that. He shrugged. That river don't take. It trades. Before she could ask what he meant, the man placed a few dollars on the counter and left, limping into the mist outside. When she followed minutes later, the parking lot was empty. Only the faint echo of a bell, maybe from a church, maybe from the wind, drifted across the valley. Mara slid behind the wheel, the photograph burning cold in her pocket. Somewhere ahead, the river waited, patient, wide, and full of answers no one had wanted to hear in 83 years. Morning bled slow over Kerrville, turning the mist into gold dust above the river. Dr. Mara Ellison parked along the shoulder of the narrow dirt road that wound down toward the old Heller property. She hadn't slept. The motel room had smelled of chlorine and damp carpet, the kind of place that eroded rest. Her dreams, when they came, were flashes of water, faces half lit beneath the surface, and the toll of a bell that would not stop ringing. Now, in daylight, the countryside seemed harmless. Low hills, cedar and cypress, a small white chapel leaning against the horizon like a tired pilgrim. Yet the closer she walked to the river, the heavier the air grew. Not just humid, but charged, as if memory still breathed here. She followed the rusted fence line to the remains of a wooden gate. Beyond it, weeds had swallowed the trail. Somewhere beneath the overgrowth, the foundations of the old Heller farmhouse still marked a rectangle of stone and dust. She crouched, brushing dirt from what looked like a metal hinge. Thomas, she whispered, not sure why. The name felt like an invocation. A low rumble of thunder answered from far off. Footsteps crunched behind her. Private land, a man's voice said. She turned to find a sheriff's deputy in khaki uniform, mid-50s, thick gray mustache, hand resting loosely near his holster. His name tag read Deputy Clay Marsh. Dr. Ellison, she said, introducing herself. University of Texas. I'm researching the 1942 disappearance of Jacob and Thomas Heller. He frowned. That's old business. County stopped talking about it before I was born. I have reason to believe someone recently tried to reopen it. I received a letter. She stopped, watching his expression. His jaw had tightened. Who sent it? Signed LM. That mean anything to you? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the river. You do best to let that lie, ma'am. Some stories don't want tellin'. Your last name's Marsh, she pressed. Any relation to Leon Marsh? His eyes flicked to hers. He was my uncle. Then you know what he confessed to. The silence between them thickened. The river moved in slow, muddy currents beyond the trees. People get old, Clay said finally. They remember things different. My uncle saw a lot. War, floods, loss. He died last year. Didn't confess to nothing that made sense. Do you still have his papers? Why? Because someone wants me to see them. He sighed. Follow me. They walked down to a rusted outbuilding behind the old service station. Inside, the air smelled of oil and paper. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling. County records, yellowed receipts, and a small chest locked with a tarnished clasp. Clay knelt, pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside lay a single leather notebook wrapped in wax paper. He handed it to her. If you're looking for ghosts, this is where they live. The first page was dated April 10th, 1942. Patrol log. Found Heller truck by bridge. No sign of struggle. River rising. Jacob's hat on bank. Boy's shoe wedged in rocks. Note, sheriff insists accident. But father's hands, cut, not water-worn. Smelled like kerosene. Mara's breath caught. He wrote this before the confession? Clay nodded slowly. Keep reading. April 12th. Found blood on chapel door. Told pastor. He said river takes what it's owed. April 13th. Woke to bell ringing at dawn. No church in sight. Sound came from the water. The writing ended abruptly. Ink smeared as if by rain. Mara looked up. Was there a chapel near the river? Still is, Clay said. Abandoned since the 60s. Locals call it the Saint of the Drowned Outside. Thunder rolled again. Closer this time, the kind that vibrated through bone. Can you take me there? She asked. He hesitated. Ain't safe in storm season. River comes up fast. I don't care. Clay studied her for a moment, then picked up his hat. You're the second one this year asked to see it. The second? Some kid from Austin. Said he was doing a podcast on forgotten cases. Name was Nico something. Her pulse jumped. Nico Alvarez? He nodded. That him? He's my assistant. He didn't tell me he'd come out here. Didn't tell me he was leaving either. The thunder cracked overhead, and for a long moment neither spoke. Mara closed the notebook carefully, the edges damp against her palms. The storm was almost here, black clouds folding over the valley. As they stepped outside, a flash of lightning revealed the river winding below, wide and dark as a scar. She could have sworn she saw something move beneath its surface, a pale shape, long and slow, tracing the current. When she blinked, it was gone. The rain began before they reached the turnoff, a hard, slanting rain that swallowed the sound of the truck's engine. Deputy Clay Marsh gripped the wheel, squinting through streaked glass. The headlights picked out glimpses of the river below, running high and gray under the storm. Mara watched the water through the passenger window. Even through the noise, she could hear it. Not a rush, but a deep, steady pulse, like breath drawn from somewhere beneath the earth. You're sure this road's safe? She asked. It's not, Clay said. That's why no one comes out here. They followed a narrow trail that wound between twisted cypress and limestone ledges. The trees leaned close, dripping. Lightning flashed once, and in that brief white light she saw the chapel. Small, stone, half collapsed against the riverbank. Its bell tower leaned to one side, the cross at its peak broken clean off. Clay parked on the incline and cut the engine. That's it. They ran the last stretch under the rain. The door was ajar, swollen from years of damp. Inside, the air was cool and sour. Mildew, dust, faint traces of candle wax. Rows of wooden pews leaned at odd angles. Mara turned on her flashlight, the beam slicing through dust motes. The altar at the front was carved from the same river stone as the foundation, streaked with mineral stains. Behind it, faint Latin inscriptions curled across the wall. Subaqua lux, sublux silentium. Underwater, light. Under light, silence, she translated quietly. You speak Latin? Clay asked. Enough to read what Faith tried to hide. She moved toward the altar. The stone was cracked down the center, as though something heavy had been pried out of it long ago. Her fingers traced the edges, sharp, deliberate. There used to be a bell, Clay said. Locals say it fell into the river during a storm. Every spring flood, folks claim they hear it ring under the water. Maybe that's what Leon heard, she said. He nodded toward the far wall. Look. A wooden door hung half off its hinges, revealing a narrow staircase descending into blackness. Storage cellar, he said. Or crypt. Hard to tell. Mara crouched at the top, shining her light down. Stone steps glistened with moisture. The air that rose up was colder, earthy, metallic, almost sweet. Clay exhaled. You really want to go down there? She hesitated, then nodded. I didn't drive 3 hours to stop at the threshold. He pulled a small flashlight from his belt and followed. The steps groaned beneath their weight. At the bottom, the space opened into a low chamber carved directly into the limestone. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Something glinted in the beam of her light. A small metal tag half buried in silt. She brushed it clean. Thomas Heller born. 1930. Her hand froze. It's a dog tag, she whispered. Children didn't wear these. Unless someone wanted to identify a body, Clay said. Unless someone wanted to identify a body, Clay said. Beside it, under a thin crust of mud, lay the corner of a photograph. Water damaged, but legible enough to show 2 faces. The same as the photo she'd been sent, only younger. She turned it over. Faded handwriting on the back read, River took the boy. Father stayed behind. Her breath clouded in the cold air. Clay, do you see this? He crouched beside her, the beam trembling slightly. My uncle wrote that. How do you know? He used that phrasing. Stayed behind. In all his notes. The chamber deepened ahead into a short corridor. The walls were lined with wooden boxes. Some collapsed into rot. She opened one gently. Inside lay prayer books, melted candles, fragments of rosaries, and bones. Not human, at least not all. Small animal remains, arranged carefully in a circle, as if part of a ritual long forgotten. Clay swallowed hard. People used to say Father Jensen ran baptisms here during the war. But these weren't baptisms, Mara said. They were offerings. Lightning cracked outside, shaking dust from the ceiling. Water trickled faster down the steps. Storm's coming in, Clay said. We should go. Just 1 more minute. She turned her light along the final wall and froze. Someone had carved words deep into the limestone, each letter gouged with a blade. He confessed. He kept the sun. Below the inscription, embedded in the stone itself, was something dark and smooth. She leaned closer. Glass. A jar, sealed with wax. Inside, a folded scrap of paper floated in cloudy liquid. Don't touch that, Clay warned. But Mara couldn't stop. She pried it loose from the stone, the seal breaking with a soft hiss. The smell that escaped was sharp, chemical, formaldehyde. She unfolded the paper carefully. The ink had bled almost away, but a few words survived. Confession recorded. Sheriff knows, no body. Still breathing beneath. She felt her stomach twist. Still breathing beneath what? Thunder boomed directly above them. The flashlight flickered. Clay grabbed her arm. We're leaving! Now they climbed the steps fast, water streaming past their boots. When they burst into the open air, the rain was torrential. The river below had swelled, eating at the bank. Lightning struck a tree not 50 yards away, splitting it clean down the trunk. They ran for the truck. As Clay started the engine, Mara looked back once. Through the sheet of rain, She thought she saw a shape moving at the chapel doorway, a tall figure standing perfectly still, as though watching them leave. Then the lightning flashed again, and the doorway was empty. The storm chased them all the way back to Kerrville. By the time they reached the station, the streets were rivers, and the thunder had turned the night electric. Clay pulled into the narrow lot behind the sheriff's office and killed the lights. Inside, the building smelled of coffee and rain-soaked uniforms. An old ceiling fan clattered overhead. Mara sat across from Clay at a metal desk, the jar resting between them under a towel. "Whatever's in there," Clay said. "We handle it carefully. County lab's an hour away. We can lock it up till morning." "I need to see it tonight," she said. "If it's evidence, it's already waited 83 years. I won't make it wait longer." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But you document everything." Mara unwrapped the jar. The cloudy fluid glimmered faintly under the fluorescent light. The paper inside had settled at an angle, edges frayed, ink nearly gone. She lifted it with tweezers and spread it flat on a tray. "Formaldehyde," she murmured. "Preservative. Someone meant for this to last." Clay leaned in. "Can you read it?" "Barely." The writing, when the light caught it, was a series of cramped lines in uneven ink. She traced them with a gloved finger, whispering as she deciphered, "April 15th, 1942. Statement of confession. Jacob Heller, taken before dawn at Saint of the Drowned. Claims he killed his son by mercy. Believes river forgives, refuses burial. Sheriff to decide fate. Father Jensen witness." She stopped. "Jacob confessed to killing his son?" "That's what it says," Clay said. "But there's no record of any confession in the file. The sheriff must have sealed it." "Sheriff back then was Henry Walsh," Clay said. "My uncle worked under him." She nodded slowly. "Walsh kept it quiet. Maybe even staged the disappearance to cover it up." Clay frowned. "Why would a man kill his own son and then vanish?" "Maybe he didn't vanish," Mara said. "Maybe Walsh made sure he did." She studied the page again. Near the bottom, faint additional words shimmered in the lamplight, barely legible. "One remains under watch, the other underwater." "What does that mean?" Clay asked. She looked up at him. There were 2 confessions. Thunder cracked outside, sharp enough to rattle the windows. The jar rolled slightly across the table. Clay steadied it with one hand. "You ever lose anyone to that river?" she asked. He nodded after a pause. "My cousin, 19, went swimming after a flood. They never found him." "Then you know it doesn't just take," she said quietly. "It keeps." He looked at her differently then, as if realizing that her obsession was something more than academic. Mara spent the next hour photographing the page, cataloging the evidence, transcribing every word that could still be read. The edges of the confession were torn, as if someone had ripped a larger document apart. "Half the statement's missing," she said. "If Leon Marsh tried to record what really happened, someone destroyed the rest." Clay leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Could be in his personal effects. I haven't gone through them all." "Where are they?" "At his house, out by the river road." "Can we go tonight?" He looked at her, incredulous. "It's near midnight and the bridge is half under water." "Then we go at dawn." The storm eased toward morning. When light finally broke through the blinds, Mara was still awake. Notes spread across the desk, the jar sealed again beside her. The confession's final line repeated in her head until it felt like a heartbeat. "One remains under watch, the other underwater." She closed her eyes for a moment. Behind her eyelids, she saw the chapel again. The inscription on the wall, the circle of bones, the altar cracked open like a wound. And she saw the river, dark and restless, swallowing light the way silence swallows prayer. At 6, Clay reappeared with coffee and 2 raincoats. "Bridge might still be slick," he said. "You sure you're up for this?" "I've come too far to stop at the edge," she said. They drove west along the flooded road. The sun hadn't yet burned through the cloud cover, and everything gleamed silver and gray. The Marsh property sat on a rise overlooking the river, an old one-story farmhouse with sagging porch steps and the ghost of white paint peeling from its boards. "Hasn't been touched since he passed," Clay said, unlocking the door. "Smells like him, too. Coffee, tobacco, paper." Inside, the house was neat, almost reverent. Shelves lined with books on theology and criminology. A typewriter sat near the window, a half-rolled sheet of yellowing paper still inside it. Mara bent to read the first few words. Statement incomplete. Evidence kept its saint of the drowned. Father Jensen knows truth. But truth. The line ended mid-sentence. A shadow passed across the window. A bird, or maybe something else. "Clay," she said quietly. "What happened to Father Jensen?" "Left the parish in 43. Some say he went north. Others say he drowned during the spring flood that year." Mara looked at the half-finished note again. "He didn't leave." "What makes you say that?" She touched the paper, tracing the final word. "Because whoever sealed that jar wanted me to find him." Outside, the wind rose again, carrying with it a faint metallic ringing, distant but clear. Clay turned toward the sound. "That bell?" Mara nodded slowly. "It's coming from the river." The sound came first as a pulse, not a chime. A slow vibration that trembled through the wet ground, too steady to be thunder, too measured to be wind. It was the unmistakable tone of metal striking water. Mara and Clay stood at the edge of the porch, listening. The air smelled of rain and rust. Below them, the river spread wide and dark, carrying branches and fragments of storm debris downstream. "It's not possible," Clay muttered. "That bell fell into the river decades ago." "It's ringing," Mara said. "Someone wants us to hear it." They descended the muddy path behind the house. The sound grew stronger with each step, low and resonant, echoing off the limestone walls of the valley. The riverbank was half flooded. Their boots sank into silt. Lightning flickered far off, faint now, as if the storm were retreating west. In the weak dawn light, the water's surface looked almost solid, smooth as metal. "There," Clay said, pointing. A few yards from shore, the crown of a stone structure broke the surface, the same pale stone as the chapel. The current lapped at its edges. "Looks like a crypt," he said. Mara stared, transfixed. It wasn't on any survey maps. Could have collapsed from the bluff years ago, or been buried on purpose, Clay said. The bell tolled again, deep and slow, vibrating the water. Mara felt it through her chest. "It's inside." Clay shook his head. "We'd need waders and ropes." Before he could finish, she was already stepping into the shallows. The water was icy, thick with silt. Her breath caught at the shock of it. "Dr. Ellison." "Stay there. If it's hollow, I can reach the entry." She waded waist-deep, flashlight in hand. The crypt's arched doorway was half submerged. Carved letters traced the lintel, worn to near illegibility. She brushed moss away until a few words emerged. "Sanctum vigilans." "Sanctuary of watchers," she translated under her breath. The bell sounded again, this time louder, impossibly close. She ducked beneath the arch and shone her light inside. The beam cut through murky water and struck metal. A bell, large, corroded, hanging at an angle. Its clapper swung lazily with the current, hitting the rim with each surge of the river. Around it floated ribbons of white cloth. Not fabric, she realized, but strips of paper sealed in wax, tethered to the bell's frame by twine. She caught one and brought it to the surface. Clay was waiting with his coat extended like a net. Together they placed it on the grass. When she unwrapped the wax, the ink was still legible despite decades underwater. Statement of Father Jensen, April 15, 1942. The boy breathes, the father prays, the river forgives neither. Jensen wrote this, she whispered, the same day as Jacob's confession. Clay crouched beside her. Then both men were here. Maybe the sheriff, too. She nodded, and something happened they couldn't bury in words. The river surged suddenly, tugging at her boots. Clay grabbed her arm. We need to get back, now. They scrambled up the bank as the current climbed the slope. The sound of the bell deepened, turning almost human, a groan, a voice rising through metal. When they reached the top, both stood gasping, soaked and trembling. Clay stared back at the water. That bell shouldn't still move. It's chained to stone. Unless something's moving it, Mara said softly. He looked at her. You think someone's down there? I think someone never left. They returned to the station at noon, clothes dried but nerves raw. Clay downloaded the photographs Mara had taken. Each image shimmered with distortion, streaks of light across the lens that didn't match the angle of the flash. Reflection from the water? He offered. Mara zoomed in. The streaks formed faint outlines. Two figures standing where she'd been in the frame, shapes bent and indistinct. Reflections, she said. But of who? She sat back, exhaustion weighing on her. Clay handed her a fresh cup of coffee, dark and bitter. I can reach the county archives, he said. See if Jensen filed anything in 42. Maybe the church kept copies of his sermons. Do it. And Clay. She hesitated. When you said someone else had come looking for the chapel, Nico, did he leave anything behind? Clay opened a drawer, then another. From the bottom, he pulled a small notebook, soaked around the edges. Found this near the gate after the last flood, he said. Didn't know it was his until now. Mara opened it carefully. Nico's handwriting filled the first pages. Field notes, timestamps, sketches of the bridge and river. But the final entry stopped her cold. March 4th. Heard the bell at dawn. Thought it was wind. March 5th. Dreamed of water over the pews. March 6th. Voices beneath the floor of the chapel. One said my name. The last page was a scrawl of black ink. He kept the boy. Mara's pulse thudded. He was here weeks ago. Before Leon died, Clay said nothing. His expression was drawn tight, unreadable. She looked up at him. You think he's gone? Gone, Clay said quietly, or not yet finished. Outside, the sun slipped behind clouds again, and the faint toll of the bell drifted once more through the valley, distant, metallic, and patient. The church archives sat on the far edge of town, behind a row of oaks that had outlived every congregation. The sign out front had peeled to near blankness, leaving only the faint trace of a cross and the word diocese. Clay parked under the dripping branches. The rain had returned, thin but constant, like the sound of sand against glass. Inside, the archivist, a thin woman with gray hair and an accent faintly Irish, looked from Clay's badge to Mara's credentials, then back again. You're here about Father Jensen, she said without prompting. Mara blinked. How did you know? The woman smiled tiredly. He's the only priest anyone ever asks about who doesn't exist on paper. She led them through narrow aisles of boxed records. The air smelled of dust and candle wax. Jensen arrived from Illinois in 1939, she said, tapping a file label. Assigned to St. Helena Parish. But in 42, he disappears. No transfer, no obituary. Nothing was he ever investigated? Clay asked. A small shake of her head. The diocese closed the matter. Officially, he died in the flood that spring. But no body was recovered, Mara said. None, the archivist confirmed, and that isn't the strangest part. Every record bearing his signature was pulled. Except one. She handed Mara a thin folder. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, its ink faded to brown. At the top, in looping script, Parish Ledger, April the 13th, 1942. Beneath it, a list of baptisms and donations, and one final entry. Confession of Jacob Heller, received before dawn. Witness to sin. River absolves. Below the entry, a crude drawing. A circle with a vertical line bisecting it, like a keyhole. Mara traced the symbol. This was carved into the chapel wall. The archivist nodded slowly. We called it the confessor's hand. No one knows its origin. Jensen used it often, on letters, even his Bible. Clay took a photograph. You have that Bible? The archivist hesitated, then gestured toward a locked case. It was recovered from the river in '47 by parish workmen. They thought it belonged to Jensen. We kept it because no one claimed it. Inside the glass, the leather cover was warped from water, the gilded edges blackened. The same keyhole mark was burned into the spine. Mara pressed her hand to the glass. I need to read it. That won't be easy, the woman said. It's brittle. We'll be careful. They spent hours in the small reading room, the rain a steady metronome against the windows. Clay photographed each page while Mara transcribed. The margins were dense with Jensen's handwriting, notes that read more like confessions than sermons. The river carries not bodies but mirrors. A father's sin is a son's inheritance. When the bell rings underwater, it is because the soul refuses to rise. What was he doing out there? Clay asked. Trying to make sense of guilt, Mara murmured, or trying to sanctify it. Halfway through the journal, a loose page slipped free. On it, Jensen had drawn the map of the valley, the chapel, the marsh property, and a small X downstream. Beneath it he had written, vault sealed by his order, confessor's box below. The same phrase as Leon's note, Clay said. Confessor's box. Mara looked at the river traced in ink, the X marking what must have been the submerged crypt. He sealed whatever happened that night. The confession, the bodies, everything. Clay's phone buzzed then. He glanced at the screen, frowned. Station says a fisherman found something lodged near the old ferry bend. Looked like a coffin. Mara met his eyes. The river's giving back. They reached the bend an hour later. The rain had slowed to a mist. Deputies were already there, knee-deep in mud, ropes securing a waterlogged box to the bank. It's not a coffin, one said as Clay approached. More like a trunk. Heavy as sin. The box was iron-banded, about 4 feet long, its hinges corroded. The symbol, the same keyhole shape, was carved into the lid. Confessor's box, Mara whispered. Clay exhaled. Of course it is. They pried it open carefully. Inside lay a folded black cassock, a rusted crucifix, and a small glass vial sealed with wax. The fluid inside shimmered faintly green. Formaldehyde again, Clay muttered. Why preserve? Then he saw what floated within. A single human hand, shriveled but intact, the ring still gleaming on its finger. Mara steadied herself against the bank. The ring bore the insignia of the clergy. Father Jensen, she said. Clay crossed himself, something he hadn't done since boyhood. So the priest didn't drown. No, she said. He was sealed. Rain began to fall again, harder this time, blurring the outlines of the river. She watched the current lap at the iron box and felt the pull of something colder than water. Memory, perhaps, or invitation. We need that ring tested, Clay said. See if it matches any surviving records. Mara nodded absently, but her eyes stayed on the vial. The hand's fingers seemed to curl faintly with each flash of lightning. It was impossible, of course. Nerves couldn't move after 80 years. Yet when thunder rolled again, she could have sworn she heard, beneath it, the faint toll of the bell, each note perfectly spaced, as if counting down. By the time they reached the county forensics lab, the river had risen another 2 feet. The technician on duty, a compact woman with streaks of silver in her hair, greeted them with the weary patience of someone used to midnight calls. Samples already logged, she said. nodding toward the sealed case on the stainless steel table. Interesting find. Mara stood beside Clay as the technician unwrapped the glass vial. The fluid inside shimmered faintly under fluorescent light. The hand within was gray, delicate, its skin drawn tight across the bones. "Preservation's remarkable," the technician murmured. "Whoever did this knew their chemistry." "Can you tell how old it is?" Clay asked. "Hard to say without tissue analysis, but the degradation's minimal. Decades, at least. We'll run DNA, cross-check with diocese records if you have a sample." Mara held up the photograph of Father Jensen's ring. "We're hoping to match it to him." The woman leaned in. "Ring's a clue. But look here." She pointed to the hand's wrist. Just above the bone was a thin tattoo, faded, almost invisible under the skin. A series of numbers. "Military," Clay said. "Army registration," Mara confirmed quietly. "World War II." The technician typed the sequence into her terminal. The screen blinked once, twice, before returning a match. "Jacob Heller, enlisted 1939. Declared missing 1942. Mara felt the world tilt. "It's not the priest's hand," she said. "It's Jacob's." Clay's mouth tightened. "Then who sealed it?" "Whoever wanted to keep the truth from surfacing." The technician sealed the vial again. "I'll run a full profile, but this shouldn't be possible. The preservation's too clean, almost like it was refreshed." Mara turned away, staring at her reflection in the glass window that looked out onto the storm-dark parking lot. Her face was pale, blurred by raindrops. She whispered, "He didn't drown." He confessed. They left the lab after midnight. Clay drove in silence, wipers slapping rhythmically. The storm had eased to drizzle, but fog rose from the river valley like smoke. "What are you thinking?" he asked finally. "That if Jacob's hand was sealed in the confessor's box, then Father Jensen wasn't his killer," she said. "He was his witness. And the sheriff? Covered it up, maybe to protect the church, or himself." Clay nodded grimly. "Walsh's family still lives near Medina. His granddaughter keeps his papers. I can call ahead." "Do it," she said. "Tomorrow morning." The road curved along the ridge. Below, the river flashed silver under the moonlight, swollen and restless. Mara couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching. At the motel, she couldn't sleep. She spread the photographs across the bedspread. The confession, the map, the vial. Each piece of evidence felt like a fragment of something larger, an incomplete sentence waiting to be finished. She opened Nico's notebook again. In the margins of his last page, he had drawn the same keyhole symbol. Beneath it, a line she hadn't noticed before. "When the bell stops, the watcher wakes." She closed the book sharply, heart pounding. Outside, the night was still, until a faint chime broke through the silence. One note, then another. The bell. She crossed to the window. The river shimmered faintly in the distance, reflecting the half-moon, but the sound wasn't coming from the water. It was coming from the hallway. She opened the door. The corridor was empty except for the hum of the vending machine at the far end. The bell tone echoed softly, as if inside the walls. She followed it to the stairwell. The sound grew clearer, metal on metal, slow and deliberate. At the bottom of the stairs lay a small envelope, soaked through from rain. No return address. Only her name scrawled in black ink, Dr. Ellison. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a photograph, taken from behind her motel window. Her silhouette was visible, leaning over the desk. On the back, written in the same hand as before, "Stop digging. The river forgives, but I don't." By morning, Clay found her pacing the lobby with the letter sealed in a plastic sleeve. "Someone's watching us," she said. He scanned the photo, jaw tightening. Could be a warning, or proof they're close. "They want the story buried again," she said. "That means we're near the truth." Clay exhaled. Then we go to Medina, talk to Walsh's granddaughter. If anyone knows what happened to Father Jensen, it's her. Mara nodded, but her eyes lingered on the river beyond the window. The fog drifted over it like breath, curling and dissipating in the morning light. For an instant, she thought she saw shapes moving beneath the surface. Shadows of two figures walking side by side, one taller, one small. Then they were gone, leaving only ripples and the distant toll of a bell that might have been real or memory. The road to Medina wound through low limestone hills and fields, slick with last night's rain. Dawn came late, thin and pale, filtering through fog like breath through glass. Mara rode in silence. Clay drove one-handed, his eyes fixed on the curve ahead. Neither spoke of the letter or the photo. They both knew fear, once named aloud, became real. Walsh's granddaughter lived on a ranch east of town. Her name was Margaret Hale, mid-70s, sharp eyes that hadn't dulled with age. She met them at the gate with a coat thrown over her nightgown. "You're here about my grandfather," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Mara said gently. "We believe he might have been involved in an unsolved case from 1942, Jacob and Thomas Heller." Margaret's expression didn't change. "Come in, then." Her living room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Family photographs lined the mantel. Stern men in uniforms, children holding fishing poles, one picture of Sheriff Henry Walsh standing by his patrol car, eyes shaded by his hat brim. Margaret poured coffee into chipped mugs. "He never talked about that year," she said. "Not to my mother, not to anyone. I only know he stopped going to church after the flood." "Do you still have his records?" Clay asked. She gestured toward a narrow cabinet. "All there. I've never read them. Some things in this family are best left shut." Mara knelt before the cabinet and opened it. Inside were 3 leather-bound journals, each labeled by year. She lifted the one marked 1942. The spine cracked softly. The first pages were routine, patrol logs, weather notes, arrests. But halfway through, the tone shifted. The handwriting grew heavier, more erratic. April 13th. "Jacob Heller came to me before dawn. Said he'd done something unforgivable, brought the boy's shoe wet. I asked where the body was. He said the river hadn't taken him yet. April 14th. Took Jacob to Father Jensen. Both insisted the boy was still breathing beneath the light. Decided to witness confession myself. April 15th. Bell rang at 3:17 a.m. Heard voices in the water. One said my name. Clay read over her shoulder. He was losing his mind. Or recording something real, Mara said quietly. April 16th. Jensen performed rite I didn't recognize. Latin. Heller begged him to stop. Boy's reflection in water, though river still. I shot to break the spell. Heller fell. Jensen said the river would remember me. Mara stopped reading. He killed Jacob. Or thought he did, Clay said. The next line was a single sentence, pressed so hard it cut the page. The boy breathed after. Margaret stood near the window, her back turned. My mother found him in that same chair one morning in '58. Heart attack, they said. But he had mud under his nails, like he'd been digging. Mara looked up. Digging what? Who knows, she said softly. The river floods. It gives and takes. Sometimes both. Did he ever speak of Father Jensen again? Margaret shook her head. Only once. Said the priest came back in his dreams. Standing in the shallows, ringing that bell, gust of wind rattled the shutters. Outside, the fog had thickened, turning the pasture into a pale sea. Mara closed the journal carefully. May I take this? Margaret hesitated, then nodded. If it helps you understand what happened to that family, and maybe to mine, then take it. On the drive back to Kerrville, Clay gripped the steering wheel tight. He confessed to shooting Heller. But the boy, Mara stared out the window. If Thomas lived, where did he go? There's no record of him after that night. Clay nodded toward the horizon. Unless he never left the river. They stopped at a diner outside Bandera. Over black coffee and silence, Mara flipped through the journal again. Near the back cover, something was tucked between the pages. A small photograph, water-stained but clear enough to make her stop breathing. A young boy stood waist-deep in the river, eyes open, expression calm. The edges of the photo were burned. On the back, faint handwriting read, "Taken April 17th, 1942. He waits." She passed it to Clay. "That's Thomas." "Could be a fake," he said, but his voice carried no conviction. Mara studied the boy's eyes, too clear, too knowing. What if he didn't die? What if he became part of whatever Jensen was trying to contain? Clay leaned back, shaking his head. "You're saying the river kept him alive?" "I'm saying it kept him." Back in Kerrville, dusk turned the sky the color of wet stone. Mara laid the journal beside the jar containing Jacob's preserved hand. She noticed, with a jolt, that the fingers had curled tighter overnight. She called the lab. "Was the vial opened?" "No," the technician said. "Still sealed." "Why?" "Because it's changing." The line went quiet for a moment. "Then you should get it out of your house, Doctor. Things that stay that long in water don't stay dead." Later, unable to rest, Mara walked down to the riverbank behind the motel. The water gleamed in the moonlight, silent now, as if listening. She crouched and touched the surface. Cold bit through her skin. A shadow shifted beneath, not reflection, not current. A face, pale, watching. She stumbled back, gasping. The bell tolled once, faint but clear. Then silence again, and the ripple smoothed itself into calm. The call from the lab came just after sunrise. Clay answered first, but Mara could hear the strain in the technician's voice even from across the room. "The tissue sample from the preserved hand," she said. "It's viable?" Mara frowned. "Viable? After 83 years? Genetic degradation that minimal doesn't happen naturally," the technician continued. "And here's the impossible part. The cells are still dividing." Slowly but alive, Clay swore under his breath. "You're saying it's regenerating?" "I'm saying whatever environment preserved it has properties we can't replicate," the technician said. "We're isolating trace elements from the fluid. You might want to see this for yourself." They arrived at the lab mid-morning. The sample had been transferred to a containment dish beneath glass. Even through the microscope, the cells shimmered faintly, pulsing with light. "It reacts to temperature changes," the technician said, adjusting the focus. "When we warm it, it moves faster." "Light," Mara murmured. "It responds to light. Just like the inscriptions in the chapel," Clay said. "Underwater, light. Under light, silence." Mara's pulse quickened. Maybe Jensen wasn't preserving death. He was preserving a witness. Clay gave her a look. "You mean Jacob? Or Thomas?" she said quietly. The hand could be part of both. Back at the station, Clay filed reports while Mara reviewed the audio logs from their visits. The chapel, the crypt, the riverbank. She needed patterns, explanations, proof that what she'd seen wasn't delusion. But when she reached the recording from the night before, she froze. The file began with the usual static and her own voice giving time and date. Then silence. Then a faint hiss, like water boiling far away. Then a whisper. "Dr. Ellison." She sat upright, headphones pressing against her temples. The voice was soft, higher than Jacob's, not quite a man's, almost a child's. "You're close." Her heart pounded. She replayed the segment 3 times. Each time the whisper came earlier, clearer. "He kept me under the light." The word sent a chill through her. She checked the waveform. The sound was embedded in the recording, not interference. No one else had been near the mic. Clay returned, coffee in hand. You look like you've seen a ghost. Listen. She handed him the headphones. He frowned, rewound, then paled. That's a kid. It's Thomas. Could be radio bleed, frequency overlap. Don't rationalize it, she snapped. We both heard it. He set the headphones down, jaw tight. Then what does it mean? It means he's still here. That evening, Mara drove alone back toward the river. The storm clouds had thinned, leaving a bruised twilight sky. She parked near the old bridge and walked down to the bank, recorder in hand. Thomas, she called softly, if you're here, I need to understand. The river murmured against stone. No response. She crouched, touching the water with the microphone. What did Jensen do to you? For a moment there was only current and wind. Then the faintest vibration, a hum, low and steady, rising through the recorder's casing. She lifted it. The red light blinked once, twice. Click. Static, then a breath. He said the river could forgive. The voice was clearer now, threading through the static. But it only remembers. Her throat went dry. Thomas, where are you? Under the watcher's hand. What watcher? The one who rings the bell. Then silence again. And the recorder went dead. She looked down. The battery light had gone out completely. When she touched it, it was ice cold. Clay found her back at the motel 2 hours later, soaked and trembling. She played him the new recording. The whisper was undeniable now, distinct words buried in the noise. You went out there alone? He asked, angry and afraid in equal measure. I had to, she said. He's communicating. You're talking like a believer. I study patterns. This is one. Clay rubbed his face. I called the diocese again. Turns out Jensen wasn't his real name. He was born Elias Thorne, expelled from a seminary in Illinois for unorthodox practices. He came south under false papers. Practices? She asked. Experimenting with sacred relics. Mixing science and sacrament. He called it theology of resurrection. Mara stared at him. He was trying to bring the dead back, or keep them from dying. She felt the chill crawl up her spine. Then the Heller boy wasn't a victim. He was a trial. They sat in silence for a long while, the motel clock ticking between them. Then Clay said, We should end this before it ends us. I can't, she said. Not when he's still reaching out. He looked at her, eyes shadowed. What if that voice isn't Thomas? What if it's something using him? She didn't answer, because deep down, she'd already considered it. And the thought both terrified and compelled her. At midnight, she played the recording again. The whisper returned, soft and insistent. Come back to the river. This time, she didn't argue. She packed her recorder, her notes, and Jacob's preserved hand, sealed in its jar. As she stepped outside, the night air was still. The stars above seemed faint, blurred by mist rising from the valley. In the distance, faint but deliberate, the bell began to ring again, 3 times, each note drawn long, echoing through the dark like a summons. She followed the sound. The road down to the river was little more than mud and gravel. Mara's headlights caught the curve of the bridge, the outline of cypress trees bent like penitents under the moonlight. The air was so still it felt like the world had stopped breathing. The bell tolled again, low, metallic, and measured. 3 notes, silence, then 3 again. She parked at the edge of the road, the jar heavy in her satchel. Inside, the preserved hand floated calmly, as if waiting. A layer of fog crawled along the water, glowing faintly in the half-light. She walked down to the bank, recorder in one hand, jar in the other. Thomas, she said softly, voice trembling but clear. I brought your father. The river's surface shifted. Ripples spread outward, touching the stones with delicate precision. Click. The recorder blinked red on its own. He remembers. A voice whispered through the speaker, not her own. Mara froze. Thomas? He tried to lift the light. It wasn't his to lift. Her throat tightened. Where are you? Under him. Under the Watcher. Who is the Watcher? She demanded. The river's priest. The bell rang again, closer this time, almost within reach. She turned toward the current and saw it. A figure waist-deep in water, motionless. Its shape shimmered with each reflection of moonlight, its face obscured by shadow. Mara stepped forward involuntarily. The jar trembled in her grip. Father Jensen! The figure did not move, but the voice came again, now layered, old and young at once. He believed water could hold forgiveness. He was wrong. The bell tolled one final time, and the figure sank without a ripple. Clay arrived minutes later, tires spitting gravel. He ran toward her, flashlight cutting through the fog. Jesus, Mara, what are you doing out here? She stood at the edge of the bank, soaked to her knees, eyes locked on the river. The jar sat open beside her, the hand gone. I heard him, she said. He's under the Watcher. Clay crouched, breath quick. You opened it? I didn't mean to. It was pulling. Pulling? The light. It moved toward the water. He looked at her, trying to decide whether to believe what he saw in her eyes. We have to go. Now Mara didn't resist when he guided her back to the truck, though she kept glancing over her shoulder. The fog thickened behind them, erasing the river from sight. They drove in silence. Mara's fingers twitched, searching for the jar that was no longer there. He's not gone, she whispered. He's awake. Who? Thomas. Maybe both of them. Clay gripped the wheel tighter. We'll talk about this when the sun's up. But the next morning the sun never quite broke through. Back at the station, Clay filed his report, omitting the details that sounded insane. Unauthorized field visit, river conditions hazardous, evidence lost in current. He found Mara sitting in the hallway outside the evidence room, staring at the floor. You didn't sleep? He asked. I kept hearing it, she said. The bell. It followed me. He crouched beside her. You're exhausted. The mind plays tricks. Does it record them too? She handed him a recorder. It turned on by itself again. He hit play. Static. Then a child's voice, unmistakably clear. He kept his promise. The river forgives, but she has to come back. Clay turned off the recorder, his hand shaking. We destroy this. No, she said. If we erase it, we lose him again. He exhaled sharply. Then at least we leave town. Tonight Mara looked past him toward the window. Outside, fog drifted low along the ground, curling between the trees. I can't, she said. He's calling. That night, she dreamt of the chapel. Not as ruin, but whole, candles burning along the altar. Father Jensen stood at the pulpit, his face a blur of light. In the first pew sat Jacob Heller, hand whole again, eyes fixed on the river visible through the open door. Thomas stood beside him, whispering a prayer that sounded like breathing underwater. Then the bell rang, and all the candles went out at once. She woke gasping, the sound still echoing in her head. On the bedside table lay her recorder. The light blinked red. She hadn't turned it on. Click. Come back, Dr. Ellison. He's waiting where the light ends. She pressed stop, but the voice continued. Bring the Watcher's name. The recorder went dead. Mara sat there, heart hammering. Then, slowly, she opened Jacob Heller's confession again. The Latin line she had never translated completely gleamed faintly under the lamplight. Sub aqua lux, sub lux silentium. She whispered it aloud. Underwater, light. Under light, silence. And then she understood. It wasn't a benediction. It was a map. The sky was pale gray when Mara left the motel for the last time. She carried little, her recorder, the confession, and a flashlight wrapped in plastic. The roads were empty, the air too still. She drove without music, following the river until the asphalt gave way to dirt. The ruins of the chapel appeared through fog, its bell tower leaning like a broken mast. She parked, cut the engine, and listened. No bell, no wind. Only the slow breathing of the water below. When she stepped inside, the chapel felt smaller than before, as if the walls had drawn closer. The altar stone lay split where she had left it. Moss glistened on the floor. She knelt beside the crack and shone her light inside. Something caught the beam, metallic, deliberate, a latch. She pressed it. Stone shifted with a hollow groan. Beneath the altar, a square of darkness opened, stairs descending into black. The air that rose up was damp and cold, smelling of limestone and candle wax. She descended slowly, her flashlight trembling against the walls. The passage wound deeper than she expected, narrowing until she had to turn sideways to pass. At last it opened into a chamber. It was round, carved from bedrock, its ceiling arched and slick with condensation. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it a bell, smaller than the one in the river, but of the same dark metal. Its surface was etched with Latin, Vigilat qui taxe. He who is silent, watches, she translated softly. The air shimmered faintly around it. Click. The recorder in her pocket activated on its own. You found it, the voice whispered. Mara turned sharply, beam cutting through the dark. Nothing moved. Thomas. He's here. Who? The one who took my breath. A faint sound, steps maybe, echoed from the tunnel behind her. She turned, light shaking. Clay's voice. Mara? Relief flooded her. How did you... He stepped into view, flashlight raised. His face was pale, drawn. You didn't answer your phone. I had to come back, she said. This is the Watcher's vault. Jensen built it beneath the altar. He scanned the chamber. What's that? The second bell. Smaller, like a vessel, Clay approached it cautiously. Maybe it's what he used to record the confessions. Mara frowned. Not record. Contain. She reached out. The bell was cold. Colder than metal should be. When her fingers brushed it, sound filled the chamber. A sudden roar of rushing water, then voices layered on voices, hundreds of whispers overlapping. He confessed. He drowned. He waited. He watched. Mara staggered back. Clay grabbed her arm. We're leaving. Listen, she shouted. It's them. Their confessions. He shook her. Mara, look at me. But she was staring at the bell. The metal pulsed faintly, light seeping through hairline cracks. Then, as if answering her, the whisper returned, clear, close, unmistakable. He never left me. The sound came not from the recorder, but from the bell itself. Mara's breath caught. Thomas! The glow brightened. Water began to seep up through the cracks in the floor, cold around their boots. Clay pulled her toward the stairs. Now! But she resisted. He wants to be freed. Mara, it's flooding. The light inside the bell flared once, then shattered into darkness. The water surged higher, waist deep, carrying with it silt and fragments of stone. Mara waded toward the pedestal, the current dragging at her legs. She reached for the bell, and saw, reflected in the water, not her own face, but a boy's. Eyes open, mouth moving soundlessly. He smiled once, faint and sad. Then he was gone, leaving only ripples. Clay hauled her up the steps as the chamber filled. They burst into the chapel just as the floor below collapsed with a dull roar. The altar stone split apart, water gushing upward like breath released after years of holding. They stumbled into the rain. The chapel shuddered once, then began to sink, stones sliding into the swollen river. When it was over, only the broken bell tower remained, leaning like a grave marker above the current. They sat in the truck for a long time, drenched and silent. Clay stared ahead, knuckles white on the wheel. "What did you see down there?" he asked finally. Mara's voice was barely a whisper. A child who wasn't supposed to die, a father who tried to save him, and a priest who thought he could rewrite faith. Clay nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now they're all part of the same current." He started the engine. "Then let's get out before it takes us too." That night, Mara reviewed the recorder one last time. Most of the audio was distortion, wind, water, the groan of stone collapsing. But at the very end, beneath the noise, came a single clear voice. "Thank you." Then the sound of a bell tolling once, soft and final. She closed the file, closed the laptop, and sat in the silence. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle. The river ran smooth, its surface unbroken. But in the faint reflection of the window, for just a second, she thought she saw a small hand pressed against the glass from the other side. Then nothing. Morning broke over Hollow Bend like a bruise. Helicopters circled the river, their rotors scattering mist across the valley. The remains of the chapel lay half submerged, a skeletal ruin sinking into silt. Deputies from 3 counties stood along the ridge, radios crackling, boots slick with mud. Mara watched from behind the yellow tape, a wool blanket draped around her shoulders. Clay stood beside her, hair plastered to his forehead, his badge catching the thin light. They had been questioned for hours, and still no one could agree on what they'd seen. "Structural collapse," the county engineer said flatly. "Sinkhole triggered by erosion." But the divers knew better. When they surfaced, they didn't speak. They only exchanged glances and shook their heads. One of them approached Clay quietly. "We found a cavity under the main foundation. Looked like a chamber, but it's gone now, washed out." Mara turned toward the water. The surface was calm again, unbroken, reflecting the slow clouds overhead. "They won't find it," she murmured. Clay rubbed his temples. "What exactly wouldn't they find, Mara?" She hesitated, then looked at him. "The vault, the bell, the Hellers, Jensen. They're all part of the same story now. The river kept it." He studied her for a moment. "You sound like one of them." "Maybe I am," she said quietly. A wind rose from the east, carrying the faint scent of incense, or maybe just wet stone. By noon, the press arrived. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions that no one answered. Archaeological collapse. Historic site destroyed. No casualties confirmed. Mara gave no statements. Her eyes followed the current as it slipped between reeds, moving toward the far bend where the water deepened into shadow. Clay finally touched her arm. "Go home." "There's nothing left to find." She nodded but didn't move until the first raindrops fell. That evening she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by notes, photographs of the Hellers, Jensen's confession, maps streaked with river silt. The recorder lay in front of her. She pressed play. Static, then the faint sound of breathing. Not hers, not Clay's. He lifted the light. He watched. He forgave. She stopped the tape. Her throat tightened. The reflection in the window trembled. The streetlights outside flickered once, twice. Mara whispered, "Thomas?" Nothing. Only rain. She gathered the pages, slid them into a box, sealed it with tape. On the lid she wrote in marker, "Heller/Jensen case. Evidence. Do not reopen." She placed it on the shelf, beside years of field work that now felt trivial. Then she poured herself a glass of water from the tap. The liquid caught the light, perfectly clear. For a moment she thought she saw motion within it, tiny ripples as if stirred from below. She blinked. The surface stilled. She drank anyway. Days passed. The town returned to its routines, the story already fading into rumor. The county called it a natural disaster. The church sent condolences and silence. Mara didn't dream anymore. When she slept, there was only the sound of water moving somewhere far away, patient and eternal. Clay visited once. He stood in her doorway, uneasy. "You ever think about writing it down?" "I already did," she said. "Not for a report." "For yourself," she smiled faintly. "Some truths don't survive print." He lingered a moment. "The divers found something this morning. Half a bell, buried in mud a mile downstream. Looked melted." Mara's pulse quickened. "Did they keep it?" "No. It dissolved when they touched it." She closed her eyes. "Then it's finished." Clay hesitated. "You believe that?" "I have to." He nodded slowly, then left her standing in the quiet. That night, she returned to the river one last time. The moon hung low, white and watchful. The water whispered along the stones, gentle now, as if tired. Mara stood where the chapel once stood. Beneath the surface, faint glimmers moved. Fish, maybe, or memory. She took the recorder from her coat pocket, switched it on, and spoke softly. "Final note. The Heller disappearance cannot be solved by law or faith. Both tried and failed. The truth lies in the current that never stops moving." She hesitated, then added, "Thomas, if you can still hear me, let go." The wind answered with a sigh. The water lapped once at her boots. She placed the recorder on a flat stone and stepped back, thinking of Nico and of a 12-year-old boy who'd waited too long. Its red light blinked faintly in the dark like a heartbeat. Then, slowly, the river rose, covered it, and the light went out. When she looked up, dawn was breaking, a pale, indifferent light spreading over the valley. For the first time, the bells were silent. 40 years later, University of Texas Archives, 2065. The reading room was silent except for the soft hum of the preservation lamps. Dust floated like snow in the narrow beams of light. Archivist Elena Hart, newly appointed curator of historical forensics, opened a sealed evidence box stamped with a date, June 12, 2025. Inside lay a recorder, a stack of field notes, and a single envelope marked Dr. Mara Ellison, Final Investigation. The tape's label read simply, Heller Case, Final Entry. Elena hesitated, then pressed play. Mara's voice, distant but steady. "If you're hearing this, then time has done what the river could not. It carried me forward." A pause, the faint sound of water in the background. "You'll find reports of what we uncovered. You'll find my mistakes, but not the sound of the bell. That's mine alone." Elena leaned closer. Static whispered through the speakers. Then, faintly, the rhythmic pulse of current against stone. "The truth isn't in the confession," Mara continued. "It's in what followed. The silence after. The way memory reshapes what it can't bear to lose." The tape clicked softly, then kept playing. "I thought I was studying the past, but the past was studying me." A sharp exhale, then, under the surface noise, something else. The faint chime of metal. A single note rising and fading. Elena frowned, checking the counter. The tape wasn't looped, yet the chime repeated, soft, precise, deliberate. She stopped the playback, rewound. The chime was gone. For a long time she sat still, staring at the recorder. Then she opened the file folder inside the box. Mara's handwriting filled the first page. Tight, deliberate, unmistakably her own. Faith built a vault to contain what reason couldn't. We called it the river. The river remembers. Beneath the line, a small drawing, a circle with a vertical slash through its center. The same symbol that had puzzled scholars for decades. The same one carved into the chapel walls before the flood swept it away. Elena traced it with her finger. "Confessor's hand," she whispered. As she turned the page, a drop of moisture fell onto the paper. She looked up. No leak, no condensation, just the faint smell of wet stone. Then, from the far end of the room, The soft, impossible toll of a bell. Once. Twice. She rose slowly, heart racing, but the sound had already faded. When she looked back, the recorder's red light was on. No one had touched it. Click. A voice, faint, childlike, whispered through the speakers. He lifted the light. Now it's yours. Elena froze, hand hovering above the stop button. Then the light went out. The hum of the lamps returned. The silence settled like dust. She closed the box carefully, resealed the label, and placed it on the highest shelf. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, soft, rhythmic, endless. Somewhere beneath the earth, the river turned, carrying every confession it had ever been given. And if one listened long enough, past the sound of water and stone, one might almost hear a bell ringing once for those the river kept, and once for those who finally let go.